afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Foreign Service Institute's Mangrove Forum on International Relations. We are privileged to have here with us distinguished guests from the embassies of Thailand, Lao PDR, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia. The Undersecretary for National Defense, Cardoso Luna, Undersecretary for Workers' Protection and Policy Support, Sriyaco Lagunsad III, Undersecretary for Strategic Communications and Research, Ernesto Abella, DFA Assistant Secretary, Millicent Paredes, DFA Assistant Secretary, Jose Eduardo Malaya, Acting Assistant Secretary, Elmer Cato, delegates of the Filipino Young Leaders Program 2018, friends from the academe and government. Also joining us this afternoon through webcast are our colleagues from Post. The Mangrove Forum International Relations is the Institute's premier platform for discussion of issues and problems in foreign policy, diplomacy, and international relations. This forum owes its name to a plant which for the Institute symbolizes a delicate structure in the international system that allows government and the academe to work collectively in tackling relevant international issues. Like the intertidal zones which sustain the life of a mangrove and the flora and fauna that thrive within it, this forum is designed to create an avenue where worlds meet, where experts, practitioners, and stakeholders come together to discuss and interact creatively. The result is synergy. In commemoration of the 67th anniversary of the signing of the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, the Foreign Service Institute, in partnership with the Presidential Commission on Visiting Forces, is hosting this Mangrove Forum to revisit the alliance, re-examine ways to deepen collaboration on issues of mutual interest. The Mangrove Forum will also situate the alliance in the context of U.S. vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. To formally open the program, may I invite on stage Ms. Celeste Vincent Balatbat, Officer in Charge of the Foreign Service Institute, to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you, Carla. Our guest, resource person, U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Ambassador Sung Kim. Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, colleagues in the government, members of the academe, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the Foreign Service Institute and our co-organizer, the Presidential Commission on Visiting Forces, I welcome you to today's Mangrove Forum. The discourse on the United States-Philippines Security Alliance can be traced to the bilateral relations between our two countries after the Second World War. On the 4th of July 1946, then President Manuel Rojas, in his inaugural speech, declared that the country would maintain close cooperation with the United States in all matters concerning the common defense and security of both countries. Reflective of these ideas, the Philippines-United States Mutual Defense Treaty, or MDT, was signed on 30 August 1951. The 1951 MDT is the core of the defense relationship between the Philippines and the United States. As such, it underpins Philippine involvement in multilateral initiatives in regional defense cooperation, as well as the country's active participation in bilateral defense arrangements with its traditional allies. The MDT, though, is not unique to the Philippines. Similar arrangements exist in the U.S. relations with the Republic of Korea through the South Korea-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty, and with Japan through the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan. Now, since its inception, the U.S.-Philippines alliance has undergone periods of breakdown, impasse, revitalization, and reconfiguration. However, despite its ups and downs, the alliance has a strong historical legacy and foundation. The United States and the Philippines enjoy a special relationship reflected in the steady growth in our military, political, economic, and people-to-people ties. This relationship is based on shared history and common values. The United States remains one of the Philippines' top trading partners, with a total trade amounting to around $840 million in the first semester of 2018 alone. Furthermore, a vast majority of Filipinos feel a tight personal bond toward the United States. According to the Pulse Asia survey results released in July 2018, the United States is among the most trusted countries, one of the countries most trusted by a significant majority of Filipinos. The US and the Philippines continue to work closely together on a whole range of issues, including maritime security, maritime domain awareness, humanitarian assistance, disaster response, cybersecurity, and combating extremism. In a security environment marked by a decline in long-standing rules-based international order and an intensified strategic competition, it behooves the treaty allies to closely examine the developments in their relationship and address lingering challenges. A candid and constructive discussion on issues of mutual security interest ensures that the alliance shall retain its strategic and operational value. As pointed out by our MC, Carla, this Mangrove Forum aims to revisit the alliance, re-examine ways to deepen collaboration on issues of mutual interest, and situate the alliance in the context of the US vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Today, we are deeply privileged to have United States Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Ambassador Sung Kim, as our main speaker. Major General Restituto Padilla, Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans, OJ5, Armed Forces of the Philippines, and Dr. Renato C. Castro, Professor at the International Studies Department of De La Salle University in Manila, will serve as discussants. I very much look forward to the presentations and the lively exchange of views this afternoon. Again, I welcome you to the FSI and to the Mangrove Forum. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
I am deeply honored to introduce our keynote speaker. Ambassador Sung Kim was sworn in as the U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines on November 3, 2016. Previously, Ambassador Kim served as Special Representative for North Korea Policy and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Korea and Japan. From November 2011 until October 2014, he was the U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Korea. Ambassador Kim has also served as the Special Envoy for the six-party talks with the rank of Ambassador. He has served in a variety of positions in the East Asia-Pacific region, including assignments in Seoul, Tokyo, Kuala Lumpur, and Hong Kong. Ambassador Kim's Washington assignments have included Director of the Office of Korean Affairs, Desk Officer in the Office of Chinese Affairs, and Staff Assistant in the Bureau of East Asia and Pacific Affairs. Prior to joining the United States Foreign Service, he worked as a public prosecutor in the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give a warm round of applause to the United States Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Sung Kim.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm deeply honored, delighted to be with all of you. I'm humbled and honored that so many distinguished senior colleagues from the Philippines government and military have joined us. I have to say I'm a bit worried that with the anticipated road closure, that I might have an empty room to speak to. So I'm relieved and delighted that you're here. Also good to see the outstanding delegates from the PhilPro program. It's nice to see you. And thank you to the Department of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Service Institute, and the Presidential Commission on Visiting Forces for hosting this event and giving me the opportunity to talk about a very important topic. And I look forward to a good discussion with the professor and the general after I get through my remarks. One of the joys of working as the U.S. ambassador to the Philippines is the chance to work with outstanding Filipino diplomats and outstanding Filipino military leaders. So it's, I think, even more meaningful that I'm standing before you to talk about the future of the U.S.-Philippines alliance. When the treaty was signed in 1951, our shared sacrifice during World War II were still very fresh in our minds. We were again reminded of this historic partnership as the United States observed Veterans Day just 9 days ago, where we recognized the services of Filipino and American veterans and their sacrifice to protect democracy and freedom. I think we can all agree that the Mutual Defense Treaty has been a very productive and successful arrangement for the first 67 years. And we very much look forward to many more years of close partnership between our two countries. Now, I know I've been asked to reflect on where our alliance is headed in the future, but before I do that, I think it's helpful to take stock of where we are and how far we have come from 67 years ago. So let me spend a few minutes reflecting on the strength of our bilateral partnership. Let's start, of course, with our security alliance. One of our oldest military partnerships. It has never been more important than now as the Philippine and American militaries work together to make the region and the world a safer place. Reflecting the Philippines' vital role in regional security, the Philippines is by far the largest recipient of U.S. foreign military financing assistance in Asia. And we strongly support the AFP's modernization program. Since January 2017, we have delivered over 5 billion pesos, that's about $95 million, worth of planes, ships, armored vehicles, and small arms to the AFP, all while training side by side with our Filipino allies. The U.S.'s commitment to the Philippines was on full display in response to the 2017 siege of Mangrove. At the request of the Philippines government, U.S. Special Operations Forces provided critical assistance to the AFP in Mangrove throughout their fight. The U.S. military also provided much-needed munitions to the AFP in a timely manner during the siege. We were there to answer your call and to provide assistance that no other country could. While we sustain our deep military-to-military engagements, we're further increasing our support for law enforcement and other civilian counterterrorism efforts by the Philippines government, stopping terrorist movement and financing, and assisting our Philippine partners in countering violent extremism. Additionally, the U.S. Maritime Law Enforcement Assistance helps bolster the Philippine capacity to patrol waters and interdict smuggling operations, wildlife trafficking, and environmental crimes, including illegal fishing. In addition to our support to the AFP, the U.S. provides significant non-military assistance to the Philippines. From 2011 to 2017, this assistance totaled over 80 billion pesos, or $1.6 billion. Provided principally through USAID, this assistance underscores the U.S. commitment to advancing a more prosperous, stable, and well-governed nation. USAID has allocated almost 3 billion pesos over the last year to assist with ongoing emergency relief and recovery operations for those affected by the Mangrove crisis, including long-term stabilization rehabilitation efforts. During a trip to Mangrove last month, I announced a new activity called the Mangrove Response Project. This latest tranche of USAID assistance to communities affected by the conflict will help these communities get back on their feet and on their road to longer-term recovery from the effects of the conflict. The U.S. development assistance focuses on accelerating and sustaining inclusive growth through activities in the areas of governance, economic growth, health, and education. We also support activities that enhance the Philippines' environmental resilience and foster peace and stability in conflict-affected areas of Mindanao. The U.S. and the Philippines share a strong and deep-rooted economic partnership as well. We are optimistic about the Philippines' economic future and look forward to further deepening our economic ties. As you may know, Philippines' largest exporter by value, Texas Instruments, their largest private employer, Concentrix, are both U.S. companies, as are some of its largest taxpayers, including Chevron. The U.S. is among the Philippines' top trading partners, exchanging more than 1 trillion pesos, or $20 billion in goods last year. In fact, in the first 6 months of this year, the U.S. was the top export destination for Philippines goods. The U.S. is also among Philippines' top 5 foreign investors, with more than 380 billion pesos, or $7.1 billion in FDI stock. These numbers are important, but what I find more interesting, and perhaps more exciting, is what it is like in some of these U.S. companies. I had a chance to visit some of our companies recently, and 3 takeaways from these visits are jobs, innovation, and opportunity. On jobs, I recently visited a U.S. company which employs 42,000 Filipinos and Filipinas, and the average age is under 27. It's really impressive. For each of these 42,000 jobs, 3 to 5 additional jobs are created in the surrounding area. Another U.S. company I visited has increased their footprint from 100 to 5,000 positions in just under 5 years. On innovation, the spirit of innovation was on full display when I visited a U.S. consulting firm called Accenture. They have this thing called Liquid Lab, which creates innovative design and consulting work. I was deeply impressed by the technology advancements being developed there, from safety helmets with infrared cameras to track access to secure areas, to designs for high-end jewelry companies. In terms of opportunity, specifically, we're seeking opportunities to expand the formal trade relationship and are working with the Philippines government to strengthen economic governance and competitiveness. This is something President Duterte and President Trump discussed last November, and the U.S. welcomes the Philippines' interest in a free trade agreement. We're working with the Department of Trade and Industry on ways to make our bilateral trade relationship more fair, free, and competitive. Of course, much of the strength of our bilateral relationship is rooted in our vibrant and robust cultural ties and people-to-people relations. There are over 4 million U.S. citizens of Philippine ancestry in the United States, and more than 300,000 Americans living and traveling in the Philippines. More and more of our students are choosing to study in each other's country. These security, economic, and cultural bonds are cornerstones of the U.S.-Philippines alliance, which in turn is one of the central pillars of U.S. security policy in the entire Indo-Pacific region. So our relationship has grown dramatically in 67 years since we signed the Mutual Defense Treaty. And returning to today's topic, quo vadis, where are we headed? My short answer to that would be onward, upward, and more of the same. Given the bilateral relationship's solid foundations and positive trajectory, I have no doubt that our security cooperation, economic ties, and people-to-people linkages will continue to grow. I'm confident and optimistic about the future of our bilateral partnership. But I think it's important to also assess more broadly, with an overview of U.S. policy for the entire region, the Indo-Pacific strategy announced about a year ago by President Trump. Our Indo-Pacific strategy seeks to support a peaceful and secure region of sovereign nations, leveraging a framework of economic growth that is private sector led. We aim to encourage growth through an economic system that is open, transparent, and rules-based. In other words, we seek to advance a free and open Indo-Pacific. Our vision for the region is clear: to support a constellation of nations that are sovereign, strong, and satellites to none. Our approach is built on principles that are widely shared throughout the region, ensuring the freedom of the seas and skies, insulating sovereign nations from external coercion, promoting market-based economies, open investment environments, and fair and reciprocal trade, supporting good governance and respect for individual rights. These values and policies have helped this region thrive and grow into the world-driving engine that it is today. We seek partnership, not domination. Cooperation with partner countries and regional institutions such as ASEAN is at the center of our strategy. Indeed, ASEAN is at the center of the Indo-Pacific and plays a central role in our Indo-Pacific vision. Our vision is inclusive. We seek to work with anyone to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific, so long as the cooperation adheres to the highest standards that our citizens demand. The economic track of the Indo-Pacific strategy is built upon private sector investment. We believe private sector-led economic growth is the healthiest model, market-driven, transparent, and financially sustainable. The need in the region is great, especially regarding infrastructure. The Asian Development Bank estimates developing countries in the Indo-Pacific need 1.7 trillion in infrastructure investment every year. That amounts to 26 trillion by 2030. No single government can underwrite that much investment. We believe the only possible answer, only realistic answer to this tremendous development need is the private sector. Only the 70 trillion in private capital located in the world's financial centers can meet the Indo-Pacific region's requirements. The U.S. supports open business environments to attract this capital. While private sector-led development is the only way to meet the infrastructure needs in the Indo-Pacific, government can and should play an important role to jumpstart the growth. And we're doing just so in the Indo-Pacific. With the passage of the BUILD Act last month, the U.S. will establish a new International Development Finance Corporation with a $60 billion investment portfolio capacity, the authority to make equity investments, and the ability to conduct feasibility studies. Our administration is also working to revitalize the Export-Import Bank of the United States, which could begin to consider the $10 billion in Indo-Pacific projects currently in the pipeline. Another new exciting initiative is the Infrastructure Transaction and Assistance Network. This whole-of-government effort will develop sustainable infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific, will help develop sustainable infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific. It establishes a new interagency body to optimize U.S. tools for assessing projects, directing development finance, and deploying technical assistance. We also have established the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership. This partnership will promote access to open, interoperable, reliable, and secure internet in developing countries, with an initial focus in the Indo-Pacific. This initiative will establish private-public partnerships to build digital infrastructure and provide technical assistance. So we're doing a lot, but our focus is always on creating a fertile environment to encourage inflows of private sector investment. Regarding the security aspect of our Indo-Pacific strategy, the United States will expand security cooperation with allies and partners in maritime security, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, peacekeeping operations, and countering transnational crime. The Indo-Pacific strategy leverages our unmatched network of alliances in the region. 5 of the U.S.'s 7 treaty alliances are located in the Indo-Pacific: the Philippines, Japan, Australia, Korea, and Thailand. Earlier this year, we renamed Pacific Command to the Indo-Pacific Command. Indo-PACOM is the oldest and largest geographic combatant command with approximately 360,000 U.S. military and civilian personnel. Earlier, I mentioned our security assistance to the Philippines. We're doing even more regionally. This year, the U.S. is providing over $500 million in security assistance to Indo-Pacific partners to strengthen maritime security and counter transnational crimes. This includes nearly $300 million in new funding to reinforce security cooperation. We're providing $385 million in foreign military financings to the region this year, more than the previous 3 years combined. The U.S. also trains regularly with our security partners, including here in the Philippines. We hold approximately 90 military exercises in the Indo-Pacific each year, building trusting relationships, increasing interoperability, and expanding partner capability and capacity. Okay, so I'm often asked, what about China? Probably a timely question that you have a visitor in town. And the second question is, how can the United States respond to China's growing war? Well, let me assure you, our Indo-Pacific strategy is not targeted at China or any other country. Rather, it is rooted in long-standing friendships and values we share with our partners and communities in the region. We seek a constructive, results-oriented relationship with China wherever possible. Indeed, the United States and China productively engage across a broad spectrum of interests. We have no intention of making countries choose between the United States and China. In fact, we welcome contributions by China for regional development, so long as it adheres to the highest standards the people of the region demand, including in areas such as transparency, rule of law, and sustainable financing. Any activities that do not adhere to these principles undermine stability and prosperity in the region. The U.S. will continue to raise concerns about actions by any country that challenge the rules-based order, which underpin years of peace, stability, and economic growth in this dynamic region. So with that slight detour, let me now conclude by returning to the question of what's next for our bilateral ties. Well, given our special historical ties, given our deep mutual security, economic, and people-to-people linkages, the U.S. is confident our alliance with the Philippines will continue to thrive in the future. We have shared sacrifices, shared values, and common ambitions. This is why I'm so honored and thrilled to be serving as the U.S. Ambassador to the great Philippines. And I very much look forward to the next 67 years of productive partnership, friendship, and alliance between our two great countries. Thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sung King, for that very informative remarks. I know some of us have already a lot of questions. Please do save them for the open forum. Now, may I invite our discussants to share their defense-related and foreign policy perspectives on the issue. But first, I would like to introduce our discussants. Major General Restituto F. Padilla Jr. is the current Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans J5 of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Prior to his assignment as the J5, he served as the Assistant Deputy Secretary of Staff for Civil Military Operations, J7. He was also formerly the AFP Liaison Officer for the U.S. Pacific Command in Honolulu, Hawaii from 2011 to 2014. It's still the U.S. Pacific Command, not the Indo-Pacific Command. Major General Padilla comes from a lineage of dedicated professional servicemen and government workers. His military career began when he entered the Philippine Military Academy in 1981. He subsequently joined the Philippine Air Force and earned his aviator pilot wings from the Philippine Air Force Flying School in 1987. Major Padilla is a recipient of numerous awards and commendations, among them from the military and civilian sectors, and includes Distinguished Aviation Cross, the highest award for an airman in the Air Force, for his superb and gallant airmanship in a rescue and recovery incident. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Major General Restituto Padilla, sir.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction. At the outset, allow me to thank FSI and ECBF for inviting me to be among the discussants this afternoon. and it's a privilege indeed and an honor to be with no less than the Ambassador, Ambassador Sun Kim, U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines. As you mentioned, also at this auspicious time when we have a very distinguished visitor in town. It also comes at the heels of some of our engagements with some of our main allies. Today, we just had an engagement with our Australian counterparts from the military, and isn't that exciting? So we are very strong allies with the US, with Australia, and we have the Chinese president visiting today. So what a wonderful mix. So let me first start by saying that the Philippines-United States alliance, I do agree with the ambassador, is growing at a very steady pace, and alliances mature after a long period of time. And our alliance has been tested many times over by quite a number of challenges, and of recent, of various types of challenges, political, economic, and otherwise. But allow me first to provide you a purview of the tremendous amount of assistance we have been receiving from the United States. And to this, on behalf of the whole armed forces, I'd like to pass on our appreciation to the United States for assisting us in many of the challenges that the armed forces has faced, particularly in the last major battle we had in Mindanao, particularly in the area of Marawi. If not for the assistance provided by our counterparts from the U.S. military, primarily from the technical assistance side of information and the like, we would not have had the opportunity of concluding the battle at the quickest time possible last year. Coupled with that, may I also pass on the appreciation of the Filipino people for the assistance provided by the United States, USAID, because recently I think the ambassador personally visited Marawi and announced the assistance of about $25 million for the response project that they are launching with USAID. And earlier, just about last week, he also announced a Mindanao Peace and Development Assistance Agreement with the USAID again in the tune of $595 million extension fund, if I'm not mistaken. So this and all is tells us of a very clear indication that we are here to assist in good times and in bad. And for that, we are grateful. Secondly, allow me also to provide a background of where we are. It is true that our alliance has been based on a very unique arrangement that we have had before the turn of the century. It was in 1951, after the close of the Second World War, when we concluded the Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. And in the context of that arrangement, we have actually two boards serving and providing direction for our Security and Defense Alliance. The first board is the Mutual Defense Board, where we take care of our territorial defense arrangements. And the second one is the Security Engagement Board, where we, under the auspices of our Romulo Kenny exchange of notes in 2006, where we provide a framework and a mechanism for working together on other security concerns that are not part and parcel of the first board's concern. So these are all are those that will have to take care of terrorism, transnational crimes, maritime security and safety, natural and man-made disasters, and where appropriate that does not fall on territorial defense or mutual defense. The Mutual Defense Board and the Security Engagement Board meets every year and is chaired by the commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command now, previously the Pacific Command, and the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. And working under them are various working groups and committees that help them and assist them in carrying out their duties to provide a vibrant mechanism for continuing this military-to-military engagement, and beyond that, even interagency arrangements that are part of the security arrangements that we need to have. Part of that also are other agencies, security-related agencies like the Philippine National Police, the Coast Guard, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, the National Coast Watch System, and other law enforcement agencies. Each year, whenever we meet, we go through 3 planning cycles. One that allows the smaller committees to meet and plan out ahead and make recommendations to the executive committee, which I chair. And this executive committee makes its recommendations to the main board itself that will soon be adopted as guidance and way ahead for every year or succeeding year's activities. So this yearly cycle of 3 meetings every year has provided a very robust engagement cycle for our defense and security cooperation activities. A part of the product of this engagement board are actually the lineup of activities that we hold every year. To date, we have about 281 exercises and activities between our forces and those of the U.S. Most of which are conducted in the Philippines and others conducted in the United States. This arrangement previously has been a growing, compared to previous years, has been a growing number of activities that have been very relevant. Apart from these legal frameworks that I have mentioned, other supporting agreements that have enhanced further our arrangements and that may not have been mentioned by the ambassador is the recently concluded EDCA agreement that we have had. It's the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement that provides allowing us to create infrastructure and mechanisms that will enhance our posture to react to HADR events and other contingencies that may benefit from the alliance. There too, we have, related there too also is a Philippine-US Mutual Logistics Support Agreement that has been very beneficial, particularly in the case of Marawi, when we needed war material to augment our operations in the field, which we could not source quickly from commercial vendors and which we source through the pipeline in our military-to-military agreement. Such agreements have actually been a part of those that have provided a robust mechanism to keep this military-to-military engagement very relevant and very timely. So this and all, in all the previous years, we have been moving forward. And I do agree with the ambassador in reaction to what he said, that we see all of these things and all of the developments of recent as indications of the very progressive nature of our alliance. Alliances take time to mature. And I guess we can say it is true for our alliance with the United States. Like a personal relationship that you may have with the opposite sex, you have ups and downs. There are times when you are chubby together, you like taking selfies, you like going places, you like exchanging stories, you like swapping jokes, you enjoy each other's company. But then also you'll have hard times. There will be times that you may not understand each other because of a difference of opinion, but then just agreeing to a difference of opinion is already a progressive thing to do, which is the context of how we have been engaging another neighbor in the region. So we have agreed to disagree, continue talking. But in the case of our alliance with the United States, despite the on and off kind of relationship, the maturity of the relationship has provided a very firm, solid foundation for many progressive items to happen and to continue on. And we have seen this tested time and again in many challenges that we have faced. Again, I go back to the first instance that I have indicated at the very beginning of this remark. So we are very fortunate that the shared values, the people-to-people exchanges, and the over 4 million Filipinos that have been in the United States for so long are part of the bond that connects each and every Filipino to the American people. And needless to say, the Filipino has a penchant for everything American, I guess, because having grown so many years under the Americans and the influence of the culture, it has imbibed many of those. You only have to attend the the U.S. Independence Day celebration on July 4th to see how many vendors have located here. So each time you look outside, where you want to eat, there's an American influence there. It has also provided us with the people-to-people connection in the military as well, because the bonds that has connected our people in terms of shared values and the people-to-people connection has been trickling down into the military as well, because there's nary a member of the armed forces that doesn't have a relative in the United States. And with the long period of time that the U.S. military has been recruiting in the Philippines, in my almost 4 years of service in the United States Pacific Command, then now Indo-PACOM, there was never an occasion or a day when I did not meet a Filipino-American serving in the American Armed Forces. And many of those who have been assisting many of our compatriots and those who have been assisting our veterans are also part of the defense establishment itself. So this and all is what I would like to start with before we start with the other relevant discussions about our alliance. And having said that, we in the military are confident that we are moving into the right direction, we are progressing, and we are evolving in much more mature ways than one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Major General Padilla. Our second discussant, Dr. Renato C. Castro, is a full professor in the International Studies Department from De La Salle University, Manila. He was a visiting fellow in the National Institute for Defense Studies of the Japanese Ministry of Defense in the summer of 2018. From June to August 2017, Professor De Castro was invited by the Japan Institute of International Affairs as a visiting research fellow. He was based in East-West Center in Washington, D.C. as the U.S. ASEAN Fulbright Initiative researcher from the Philippines from September to December 2016. Dr. De Castro has written over 100 articles on international relations and security that have been published in a number of scholarship journals, monographs, and edited works in the Philippines, Japan, South Korea, Canada, Malaysia, France, Singapore, Taiwan, Germany, the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. De Castro.
Ambassador Sung Kim, ladies and gentlemen, my friends, fellow academics, and I used to work here in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Services, my former colleagues in the Foreign Service Institute. Good afternoon. When I first got the invitation, I was kind of excited because I was thinking, oh, I'll be able to present my views regarding the alliance. Then I realized, my goodness, I'm just a discussant. I'm a counterpuncher. My job is basically to react or to, of course, give my opinion regarding issues that, of course, would be raised by His Excellency, the main resource person of this afternoon. So I think my job as, I'm not a diplomat, I'm an academic. So my task is basically to provide a wider perspective, basically coming from the academic point of view, and possibly be more candid and a little bit provocative this afternoon. Because, again, I'm not a diplomat. I have no, I'm not, what do you call this, accountable for any organization. I'm accountable, of course, to the abstract notion of truth as an academic. So that gives me a license to be provocative every now and then. I hope you will respect that license that I'm asserting it this afternoon. So I will start with the basic point. I really like the conclusion of the ambassador, very optimistic about the alliance, that the alliance would move on to the next 67 years. But, you know, my discussion would basically try to call into this. Are we supposed to be optimistic regarding the alliance? But before I go discussing the alliance, let me, as an academic, discuss some nuance regarding when we talk about alliance. Number one, what is alliance? Number 2, what's the basis of any alliance? Number 3, what's the difference, of course, between alliance and friendship? Then, of course, a little discussion which was raised by my good friend, General Padilla. He basically mentioned a very important element that is part and parcel, of course, of our alliance with the United States. And that is, of course, alliance politics. Allies generally do not agree on an issue. You have differences, and so you have this dynamic notion of alliance politics. And an overview of the alliance, and possibly, this is a provocative part, looking at the future of the alliance probably in the next 6 to 7 years. Okay, let me start with my sort of a lecture. Number 1, what's an alliance? Number 1, alliance, of course, are formed not because you like each other, but because you dislike somebody else. Yeah, you have basically a threat, the notion of a threat. This reminds me of Churchill, Winston Churchill, after, of course, Germany attacked the Soviet Union, Barbarossa. When he said to this parliament, you know, if Hitler goes to hell, I might say some favorable things about the devil. So alliances are formed not because you like each other, but because, of course, you are faced with a greater threat. And of course, another component of the alliance is the fact that allies commit to assist each other. That's why General Padilla mentioned we have a lot of allies. I tend to disagree, because technically we only have one strategic ally, and that's the United States. We have security partners, Japan, Australia, but they are not committed to provide us assistance. Only the United States that is, of course, committed to assist us under the Mutual Defense Treaty. So, as an academic, I think I have some license every now and then to correct my colleagues and practitioners. We only have one strategic ally, and that's, of course, the United States. And, of course, that's formalized under the Mutual Defense Treaty. Number 2, of course, again, what's the base of the alliance? The base of alliance is that you're faced with a threat. The greater the threat is, the more cohesive an alliance would be. Once the threat is gone, then, of course, that's you have to break down the alliance. Just look at what happened to the Grand Alliance during the Second World War. Alliance of the United States, the Soviet Union, and, of course, Great Britain. After, of course, Germany, the Axis power gone, the alliance broke apart. So there's a very nature of alliance. And of course, we have to give credit for the fact that we have ensured to continue this alliance way into the 6 to 7 years. Of course, later on, we'll talk about the ups and downs of the alliance, which, of course, my friend General Padilla mentioned. And of course, this is our problem regarding our alliance with the United States. Alliances are not friendship in international relations. Alliances are primarily utilitarian relationship, where you try to extract the most out of your ally and give the least. But of course, there should be a balance regarding this. And this is something I would raise earlier. Alliances, of course, are a matter of reciprocal relation. You form alliances because you give something in return and you get something in return. I've been married for the last 25 years. In a way, I think one very good example of alliance is marriage after that romantic stage. It's really become, you know, you have to have a purpose. You know? The utilitarian element of the relation comes there. So we cannot simply basically ignore. Of course, despite the talks of long-standing friendships, so forth and so on, we have, of course, in the case of our United States, we consider the United States as a good friend in terms of transnational relationship, historical values, but you also have the problems, of course, the fact that alliances are not friendship in international relations. Decisions made in alliances are based on a calculation of power. You know, what will I basically get from this? And of course, this is raised by my good friend again, alliance politics. Allies do not usually agree on a lot of issues. A good example, of course, is, again, if I refer to the special relationship between the United States and Great Britain at the onset of the Second World War, if I'm an enter of the United States. Of course, at the onset, Americans wanted to cross the channel and, of course, launch Operation Sledgehammer against the Germans. Britain would say no. No, so you have already the dispute between two very close special allies during the Second World War. Of course, the British had to sacrifice the Canadians, the entire Canadian division, just to tell the Americans, you know, what you're proposing will be a suicide. So I'm just using it as, of course, the point that allies generally do not agree. And that's why you have the classic statement of Churchill. No, I'll just refer to Napoleon. Give me an ally so I can fight. So this is basically the nature of fighting. You allies disagree, And of course, what will basically keep the alliance intact is the fact, despite this agreement, is that you have a common purpose, and the common purpose, of course, is to address a strategic challenge. Just an overview of the alliance. Of course, this was mentioned earlier, the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. But before that, the basis of the alliance was not a formal mutual defense treaty. It was, of course, the Military Bases Agreement of 1947. Of course, that was already the beginning of our alliance politics with the United States. The Philippines was asking for a formal security guarantee from the United States, but then to respond to the United States, we already have those bases here. There's no more need, of course, for a formal security guarantee. The security guarantee only came, of course, the MDT was a result of the Korean War, when Japan, of course, was about to be given back its sovereignty. As a guarantee against possible resurgence of Japanese militarism, we asked for a security guarantee for the United States. So the origin of the alliance was not only directed against the communists, it was directed against a possible revival of Japan in 1951. So I'll just breeze through this. And of course, the basis of the alliance has always been the basis, the military basis. You have the Mutual Defense Board, but the primary focus of the alliance was, of course, the fact that the Philippines was the site of two major American military facilities. I could still remember when I started my job here in the Foreign Service Institute, we did field work in Clark and Subic Naval Base. So for me, this was a formative years of my career looking at the bases. But of course, the alliance suffered a major breakdown in 1991 when, of course, the Philippine Senate did not concur to the Philippine-American Cooperation Treaty of 1991. Everyone was expected with the end of the Cold War, with the end of course, what's basically the basis of the alliance if you don't have a threat. But fortunately, of course, the alliance survived. By 1996, you have, I would use the term, the revival of the alliance. And guess it's because of somebody was knocking on our door. A big neighbor was starting knocking on our door and occupied a land feature of Palawan called Mischief Reef. That basically led to the revival of the alliance, the Visiting Forces Agreement. Then I would use the term the revitalization of the alliance after, of course, the attack on the United States. 9/11, I call the revival, when of course you have, of course, but of course revival was kind of short-lived because of what happened in 2004, when the President Arroyo then decided to withdraw that tiny contingent of Filipino forces in Iraq, which led to a minor breakdown, but get what the former President did. He went, of course, to our big neighbor, China, leading, of course, the, what I would call the efforts to basically balance the alliance by going to the, being friendly to a big neighbor in the, near our backyard. So you have the revitalization of the alliance way, of course, up to, I would say, to the time of former President Aquino, when we signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which was not originally intended simply on humanitarian assistance and risk reduction. It is also aimed, of course, at ensuring that you'll have the continuous access of American forces just in case our big neighbor start, of course, rocking the boat. So let me just go to the present, what's basically, of course, the challenges. Again, I will try to be as optimistic as possible as Ambassador Sung Kim, so hopefully the alliance would survive. Of course, again, what's the basis of the alliance? The basis of the alliance, of course, is that we should have a common view about a common threat in the region. Of course, the challenge right now is, of course, the so-called emerging challenge against the rule-based international system. When you have an emerging power that's bent on maritime expansion and basically slowly unraveling the rules-based international order. But how can you say you have a common view regarding that threat if you're cutting a deal? When you think that economic gains are more important than strategic advantages, and of course the importance of the rule of law, where you basically have to disregard a very important decision by a court of arbitration, then you set it aside simply because money is more important than strategic values, then of course to a certain degree your common link what we consider as your formal treaty ally. And of course, this is one thing I also raise about alliances. Alliances are not one-way street. They're supposed to be reciprocal. General Padilla mentioned about the assistance provided to us by the United States in terms of the arms that were given at the time that we needed most. Then, of course, the provision of a reconnaissance plane. But then we have to ask ourselves as Filipinos, what do we give in return? Do we offer our ally diplomatic and strategic support, given the fact that we had gotten material, assistance when we needed most? Then we start talking about that probably our allies are the ones causing tension in the region. I think we have to basically reflect on what we think and what we say regarding our foreign policy, because again, alliances also in terms of degree of obligation, not only shared views of the challenge, but more importantly, shared values. And I think one thing that ensured that this alliance has survived going to the 60s, it's not just a matter of having a common threat, it's the fact that we shared common values. Values of human rights, values of adherence to liberal democracies, values referring to, of course, adherence to a rule-based international order, and of course the importance of rule of law. Then of course, a challenge right now, of course, is the fact that once you have an alliance, you cannot be friends to all, because you have commitment to the other side. Just like I mentioned earlier, an alliance is a two-way street. There's a commitment. You know, you expect your ally to come in your assistance, but on the other hand, you basically imply that, you know, I won't assist you if push comes to shove. So what's the basic point of the alliance? But nevertheless, again, I go back, all alliances have this very dynamic element of alliance politics. You will have disagreements. But what would basically, I think, would ensure that this alliance survives, not just simply because we're faced by a common challenge, and more importantly, we have shared values that's more important than ever. Importance of, do we value our liberal democracy? Do we value our freedom? Do we value the rule of law? Do we value the rule-based international orders? I think as a nation, it's time for us to reflect on whether those values are important enough, those values are important to stand for, and those are values that we share with our only strategic ally, the United States of America. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.